In the studio, we both sensed that. Naturally, it seemed as though we were meeting for the first time at first. During his adolescence, Dave Gahan enjoyed stealing and burning automobiles. He was expelled from school and faced jail time by the age of 16. Before sending him to prison, the courts gave him one final chance. Then everything changed in 1980 when he entered a scout hut. However, the Depeche Mode vocalist recently made an admission that shocked the music industry after decades of popularity, addiction, and near-death experiences. He finally said what supporters had been muttering for years in December 2024, when he was 63. He disclosed that the reality extended beyond the band's future. Everything was at stake. Dave Gahan was born in Epping, Essex, on May 9, 1962. Unlike most individuals, he was not born in a hospital. His father, Len Colcott, who had Malaysian ancestry, drove buses, while his mother, Sylvia, worked on London buses. He was born in a modest home on Romford Road, where his parents were struggling to make ends meet in the years following World War II. However, Dave's father abruptly left when he was just 6 months old. Suddenly, Sylvia found herself raising Dave and his older sister, Sue, by herself. It did not get any simpler. Dave will never forget what occurred to him when he was 9 years old. Jack Gahan, his stepfather, who had taken over after Len vanished and raised the children as his own, passed very unexpectedly. Once more, Dave felt as though his entire universe had been torn apart. The fact that Jack's true father, who had long since abandoned them, unexpectedly appeared shortly after his passing only made matters worse. A visitor was seated in the house when Dave arrived home from school. He was shocked to hear his mother say, "This is your real dad." "That's not possible. My father is dead." Len kept coming around trying to play father for a whole year, he told her. Then, as before, he disappeared once more, and Dave never saw him again. Two abrupt departures from the same man left a deep scar, the kind of thing that stayed with him and shaped his perspective on the world, particularly authority. He learned not to trust too easily, and his behavior in school started to spiral out of control. He attended Basden's Barnstable School, but he didn't stay long. By the time he was 14, he was skipping classes, spray painting graffiti on walls, smashing windows, and not caring what people thought. What was worse, though, were the cars. He didn't just steal them. He would race them through the streets for amusement before setting them on fire. He subsequently stated, "I loved the excitement of nicking a motor, screeching off, and being chased by the police." Eventually, the school had enough and expelled him permanently in July 1978. At the age of 16, claiming he was unruly and a negative influence on the other students. He then tried a variety of jobs, roughly 20 in 2 years. At the age of 15, he began attending punk shows in London, where he saw bands like The Clash and The Damned. He worked on construction sites, did hard labor for meager pay, and even worked at a yogurt factory. But every paycheck went directly into his developing love for punk. He purchased equipment from the same store the Sex Pistols used, acquired a leather jacket, accessories, and even got his first tattoo. He was particularly inspired by Dave Vanian of The Damned, and after seeing him perform, he thought, "I can do that." However, his criminal streak continued, and before he turned 16, he had already appeared in juvenile court 3 times. On one occasion, he was so incensed that he destroyed his probation officer's entire office, after being turned down for a job at a gas company due to his record. He was punished by having to report to a correctional facility in Romford every Saturday for a year, where he was forced to box, have his hair chopped off, and perform physical labor. The court made it plain that he would be sent to a juvenile prison for one more infraction. But then something happened that changed everything. When he was barely 18, he went to a scout hut in Basden for a casual jam session in March 1980. He performed David Bowie's Heroes, and Vince Clarke, who was forming a band called Composition of Sound, heard him. Vince requested him to join the band, because Dave had no formal training but his voice had a raw strength. Unaware that he had just embarked on a whole new journey, Dave could have found himself in a correctional facility had he not entered that scout hut that day. Later that year, in October 1980, while working on store window displays, he saw the name that would become theirs forever in a French fashion magazine. They adopted the name Depeche Mode, which translates to fashion news, and although the magazine was initially offended, it ultimately helped them with publicity. Dave claimed that the magazine even wanted to do a photo shoot with them. Dave's energy and voice helped give the band a new identity, and despite his love of punk and his admiration for Susie and the Banshees, His stage presence was shaped by the Damned. After seeing a performance by Fad Gadget, he combined this attitude with the new world of electronic music. The band soon abandoned guitars and switched to using only synthesizers, and his wild stage moves began to show more influences from Prince Elvis and Bowie to MC Jagger. He incorporated all of this into his own style, and by late 1980, they were playing small clubs in London. They started out making only $15 per show at the Bridge House, but things quickly took off. On November 12, 1980, they were opening for Fad Gadget when they were seen by Daniel Miller, who ran Mute Records. A few weeks later, on December 10, they received two offers, one from Mute and another from a major label offering $200. They declined the large sum of money and shook hands with Miller instead. They then played their first show in the United States on January 22, 1982, at the storied Ritz in New York. This was a significant step, because the band had only 3 members at the time of Vince Clarke's departure on December 3, 1981, and Dave's presence had grown to the point where the audience was in awe. Their first album, Speak and Spell, was released on October 29, 1981. The song Just Can't Get Enough reached number 11 on the UK charts, and put them on the top of the charts. Dave himself wrote one of the songs, Tora, 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 which was inspired by his obsession with World War II. He was no longer stiff, he danced, shouted, and held the audience like a true rock star. Over the years, that theme of conflict and power kept coming up in his work. Many people believed the band was over when Vince Clarke left, but in September 1982, A Broken Frame was released, and Dave sang the song See You in a single take, which became their biggest hit to date, and peaked at number 6 in the UK. The album also reached number 8, demonstrating that they could continue without Clarke. When Dave began to get wild on stage during the 1982 tour, he stripped down to his underwear during shows in Germany, which caused the press to go crazy and make up wild stories. One of them claimed that Dave had to be carried off stage and fed fluids. Martin Gore took over as songwriter, and Alan Wilder hadn't even joined the band yet. In 1981, the band placed an ad in Melody Maker, seeking a new member. Alan Wilder was 22 years old. Technically too old, but Dave didn't care. Another said they detested fans under the age of 20. However, all the rumors only helped the band gain popularity. In 1984, their song People Are People was featured on West Germany's Olympic TV coverage, making it their first #1 hit worldwide. Alan could play anything, he said during his audition, and Dave insisted on hiring him. It was a perfect fit, and Alan's first performance took place on January 20, 1982. Daniel Miller officially became a member of the band in October of the same year with a simple phone call. By 1983, Dave was more confident and wanted to influence the band's ideas and appearance rather than just sing. When Construction Time Again, the first album with Alan Wilder as a full member, was released on August 22, 1983, its sickle and hammer imagery demonstrated his growing interest in industrial themes and working-class struggles. Dave even helped come up with the album's concept, naming it after a Pipeline lyric. Dave Gahan was a young British singer when things started to change in the 1980s. His vision began to guide more than just the music. It shaped the entire identity of Depeche Mode. The album, which was co-produced by Daniel Miller and recorded at the Garden Studios in London, peaked at number 6 in the UK and number 7 in Germany. When Depeche Mode released the song People Are People in 1984, Dave's voice made the message very apparent. The song became more than just a success. It became a message, rising to number 13 on the US Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 in West Germany. His voice gave the lyrics, which were about actual suffering, prejudice, and violence, particularly against the gay community, which was the target of severe attacks at the time. When he sang People Are People, the lyrics were more than simply words. Therefore, why should we have such a bad relationship? It felt more than just a tune. It was like a call for help. By 1985, the band was on a huge tour. The following year, they were granted permission to perform in East Berlin, behind the Iron Curtain, making them one of the few Western bands to play in communist East Germany. Dave took the stage at Valduna on May 18, 1986, and didn't hold back. The crowd was full of young people who had never seen anything like it before. And Dave was more than just a singer to them. He became a symbol of freedom. That night remained in their hearts for years, proving that music could transcend even the most difficult boundaries. He He crowd surfed, danced wildly, and broke the rules. Dave and Martin Gore started working on something deeper and darker that same year. Their album Black Celebration, which was released in 1986, revealed a more raw and personal side of Depeche Mode. Dave had been worn down by touring and felt alone, and the music reflected that pain. The song Stripped used car engines and fireworks as sounds. Gore's lyrics were inspired by authors such as Camus and Kafka, but Dave's voice was what gave them a human touch. One line read, "Your optimistic eyes seem like paradise to someone like me." That wasn't just poetry, it was real. Then came 1987, when the band released music for the general public, and something magical happened. The album sold over 1 million copies in the US alone, and it went platinum in France, Germany, Sweden, and everywhere else. Never Let Me Down Again became an anthem, and when Dave raised his arms during the chorus, the entire crowd did too. Tens of thousands of fans moved in unison, like one enormous wave, a tradition that fans still adhere to today. In 1988, Depeche Mode filled the Rose Bowl Stadium in California, with 60,000 fans on June 18, something no one had done in 8 years. The concert was featured in the 101 documentary, which was filmed by the legendary Depeche. Dave had become a true frontman, and people compared his stage presence to that of legends like David Bowie and James Brown. In 1989, Depeche Mode released Personal Jesus, a song written by Martin Gore after reading Priscilla Presley's book, Elvis and Me. The energy was electric, and you could hear people singing the chorus after the band stopped playing. Dave let the crowd take over during Everything Counts. It was the song that catapulted Depeche Mode into the next level of fame, and Dave delivered every word like he meant it. The song had a strong guitar riff and didn't sound like their earlier work, but it worked. It peaked at number 13 in the UK and number 28 in the US. The idea was about worshiping someone too much, like a personal savior. But there was a cost to popularity. In 1993, when the devotional tour had 180 dates, Dave's drug addiction became out of hand. The band cautioned him before the tour even started that they might not survive if he didn't quit, but Dave promised to try. His addiction wasn't just ruining shows, it was ruining his life. In October 1993, Dave had a heart attack on stage during a show in New Orleans. He felt his chest tighten and lost the ability to hear anything. The band continued to play while paramedics rushed him away. He missed sound checks, arrived late, and occasionally didn't show up at all. Dave later stated that he didn't take it seriously at the time, but he was in denial, and the signals were all there. Then, in August 1995, while he was alone and depressed in his West Hollywood home, he attempted suicide by slashing his wrist with a razor blade. He was still conscious when the police arrived, and his only emotion was intense sadness. He later acknowledged that his cry for help was not about death, but rather that he wanted someone to notice, and that someone did. He lived, but the pain persisted. And on May 28, 1996, the nightmare worsened when Dave overdosed on a speedball, a combination of heroin and cocaine. He was legally dead for 2 minutes after collapsing in the restroom of his hotel in Los Angeles. Paramedics informed him that he had enough cocaine and heroin to kill a horse. He was handcuffed to a police officer upon his return, and he immediately resumed his use. It wasn't just addiction, it was devastation. During the 1995-1996 Ultra sessions, they only got one good vocal tape in 6 weeks, and the band contemplated disbanding. Gore considered releasing the song alone, but Dave managed to survive, and after the court ordered him into rehab, he finally began to change slowly and painfully, but it worked. Ultra was released and reached number 1 in the UK and Germany. The band was still going strong, and even though Dave had only been sober for 8 months by 1998, they went on tour not immediately testing the waters with small shows called Ultra Parties. However, the real moment came on September 30, 1998, when they played at Wembley Arena. Dave was radiant, the crowd sang along with them, and the energy was back. The spark was back. His first solo album, Paper Monsters, came out in 2003 and was honest and personal, with songs like Dirty Sticky Floors discussing his past, drug use, near-death experience, and shame. The album went on to become number 36 in the UK and top 10 in Germany, Sweden, and Switzerland. He wrote all of the songs with Knox Chandler, who played nearly every instrument. Hourglass, which Dave co-produced this time, was released in 2007. He was more self-assured, and the lead single, Kingdom, came out in October. The album reached the UK top 10, and songs like Saw Something demonstrated how much he had matured. The lyrics were part confession, part healing. But life had one more test. Dave became very sick on May 12, 2009, just before a concert in Athens. He was taken to the hospital, where doctors discovered a low-grade tumor in his bladder, and they discovered that he had cancer. Surgery removed the tumor, but 15 shows were canceled, including a major show in London. Nevertheless, he returned to the stage a few weeks later, on June 8. I built a room in my house called the Blue Room just for drug use, and I once stayed in there alone for 3 weeks. Dave's journey through the 1990s was filled with addiction, arrests, and rehab. He finished the tour while still receiving treatment. His band gave him a final choice: get clean or the band is done. This was his 9th rehab. Dave Gahan's life was never easy. In 2013, when Depeche Mode published their album, Delta Machine, Dave was going through a very personal time. The previous 8 had failed, but this one saved his life. He was clean by 1998, and in 2011, MusiCares honored him for more than 10 years of sobriety. His cancer diagnosis completely altered his approach to writing music. Secret to the End, one of his songs, was more than simply a song. It was him posing the most difficult questions. And he recalled thinking, is this the end? Should he acknowledge that this was the last time he saw himself clearly? The whole album seemed like a sea change. He changed their typical electronic sound by including blues influences. Writing those songs, he later claimed, literally saved his life. He has already transformed by the time the album was released on March 23, 2013. Something had changed once more when Depeche Mode made a triumphant comeback in 2017. Dave was no longer merely singing. He was yelling. He felt unable to remain silent because of the instability in the world around him. Where's the Revolution? Is the lead single. Was angry. He was upset at the way fear was being used as a weapon and how people were being silenced. Racism, authoritarianism, and the refugee crisis all permeated the music. He was more than simply a frontman at the age of 55. He was becoming into a spokesperson for a greater cause. Some attempted to distort their message. One white nationalist falsely asserted that Depeche Mode backed his cause. Dave, however, made it apparent that they supported the opposite. We just seemed to be slipping backwards, he remarked, heartbroken by the way the world looked to be collapsing. It was more than just a record, it served as his caution. Then, in 2022, everything was different. Andy Fletcher, their longtime bandmate, unexpectedly passed away from an aortic dissection on May 26, at the age of 60. Dave took a hefty hit. Memento Mori, their 15th studio album, was the result of their grief. It was unsettling because, despite the fact that all 12 tracks were composed prior to Andy's death, they all seemed to discuss death, memory, and the hereafter. Ghosts Again, the first song, was released on February 9, 2023. Dave said that it was a peculiar blend of hope and despair. He encouraged everyone to keep in mind that we will all be ghosts one day. It wasn't just dark, though. It contained a light. Dave himself wrote 3 of the tunes. He hadn't performed this well since his early years of recuperation. It seemed as though the record was a farewell letter to Andy, and possibly to himself. Nobody could have predicted how much Dave would have to do when my tour started on March 23, 2023. It continued for 112 performances, till April 8, 2024. Despite being 61, he moved like a 25-year-old on stage. He appeared to be writhing, twisting, and sprinting like he was on fire, according to fans. However, something broke during performances in Mexico City in September 2023. He started crying. Some tunes he could hardly finish. The crowds were enormous. And every night during World in My Eyes, he stopped to talk about Andy, pointing to the screens that displayed his image and saying, "Our friend Andrew Fletcher." He was exhausted by the weight of the more than 3 million attendees. During powerful songs, some fans saw him stooping and struggling for air, yet he returned a few seconds later as if nothing had occurred. He later said that it was the most difficult trip of his life because of the grief. Dave had already experienced many highs and lows in his personal life, long before any of this. After dating actress Joanne Fox since 1980, he wed her in 1985. On October 14, 1987, while Depeche Mode was at the height of their fame, their son Jack was born. However, the marriage was failing behind the scenes. Dave continued to go far from home, and his drug addiction worsened. The chaos was too much for Joanne to bear. The band's tumultuous divorce was made public in 1991, while they were on the Violator tour. According to Dave, it was one of the most agonizing periods of his life, and everything came at him at once. While Dave attempted to flee the wreckage by relocating to Los Angeles, Jack remained with his mother. He remarried in 1992, this time to Teresa Conroy, who served as the band's public relations representative. However, this was not a pleasant tale of love. Dave arrived for the wedding intoxicated, and they were both using heroin. They were just two people slipping farther into addiction when they got married in Las Vegas, with no friends or family. Dave claimed that although she participated in everything, she never coerced him. The union grew void. They hardly exchanged words. It was already over by 1995. Then Dave overdosed on May 28, 1996. After injecting cocaine and heroin together, he passed out for 2 minutes before being brought back to life. His life had reached its lowest point. However, he was able to find the light in the midst of all that gloom, thanks to an unexpected person. She was a Greek-American actress and filmmaker named Jennifer Klass. While he was recuperating, they met at a spa in the mid-90s. She wouldn't give him the name Dave. As if naming a fresh version of him, she dubbed him David. They were married in a customary Greek Orthodox wedding on February 14, 1999. Stella Rose, their daughter, was born on July 29th of that year. Jimmy, her son, was also adopted by Dave. Prior to the wedding, he became a follower of her faith. Jennifer was there for him when he was diagnosed with cancer in 2009. Even after more than 25 years, Dave continues to claim that her devotion keeps him alive and sober. However, Dave was unable to mend every relationship in his life. He was raised believing that Jack Gahan, his stepfather, was his biological father. However, a stranger knocked on the door when he was 10 years old in 1972. Dave was astonished when his mother said, "This is your real father." He believed his father had passed away. Len Calcott had departed when Dave was only 3 years old. He returned once more, this time permanently, after a year of visits. When Dave was just 9 years old, his father, Jack, had passed away. And Dave never had the opportunity to talk to Len again after his death in 1994. His work ultimately reflected that pain, particularly in the solo song, Stay from Paper Monsters. Dave ultimately revealed the truth to his supporters in December 2024. He said that Deepode was taking a vacation in an interview with NME. He doubted that another album would ever be released. Both he and Martin Gore were worn out from the lengthy Memento My tour. For the first time in their careers, both of them felt accomplished. When Dave asked Martin whether he had been writing, Martin simply replied, "Nah." Dave did not rule out performing music in the future. However, nothing was planned at that time. Dave played in a concert honoring his friend Mark Lanegan at London's Roundhouse on December 5, 2024 in the same month. It was a celebration dubbed Mark Lanegan's 60. Dave wished to pay tribute to Mark, who had passed away. Alongside well-known artists like Chrissie Hynde and Josh Homme, he performed Cat People and other tunes. Dave's rare solo time demonstrated to his admirers that he still had much to offer. Even though Deepays Mode was currently silent, Depeche Mode was honored into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2020, long before Fletcher passed away and before the epidemic. They were eventually acknowledged in 2018, after being overlooked in 2017 and 2018. They stood next to icons like Nine Inch Nails and Whitney Houston. They were commended by the Hall for transforming post-punk and techno sounds into something fresh. The victory was bittersweet. Due to CO, the ceremony was postponed until November 2021 yet. The timing added to the emotional impact of the event. Their music about darkness and loneliness felt more pertinent than ever when people were stranded at home, alone,